Hey guys, this is Adrian from Blitz Kids, and today we're going to be going over Game of the Week. So I was playing the black pieces in this position, and my opponent was fairly strong. The main objective over this game is we're going to see how to first find the tactic, and then second, how to convert afterwards. Because not all the time after the tactic you just win or your opponent resigns. Sometimes they keep fighting, most of the time actually. And if that's the case, then you have to break them down, break the position through, and then get through to the king. So we're going to go through that and see how that process looks. All right, so hopefully this game helps you guys out. All right, so my opponent played e4, and I responded with e6. And the time control of this match was a 15-15, so 15 minutes with a 15-second increment. And so I wanted to pop out something that I'm actually used to and pretty experienced in. So I actually play the French defense. So e6 definitely signals that you want to take control over or contest this e4 square by first controlling d5. So now that I can push my pawn to d5. So here, knight f3, pawn to d5, again contesting e4. Now that he pushes forward, I have control over this square firmly. Now my next mission is to get rid of his strong square, because if you notice this pawn right here, he has some very nice squares taken away. Like, for instance, my bishop can't go to d6, and my knight can't go to f6. So this pawn on e5 is quite annoying, and this is going to be part of my main game plan. So that's why I play these next couple of moves, which are first c5, which cuts the support from my opponent playing d4, which would then firmly place the pawn on e5 on a very nice square. So first c5, d4, and d4 is actually not the main move here, but then again, he did kind of switch some move orders around. I guess it's playable, but nevertheless, not the best play. So he falls directly into what I was talking about. And now I can play knight to e7. And knight e7 just prepares knight to c6. I really want to put pressure here. The reason why I don't play knight c6 right away, oops, is because my opponent could then just capture, and then I recapture, and then I don't really have much pressure here, but that's still playable too. It's not a bad move. I just decided a different approach. So bishop to g5, knight to c6. So again, he can actually go into that line that I was just talking about. And now bishop to b5. And here, I play bishop to d7. So, to be fair, I haven't really encountered this particular line of play. So I just knew that I needed to develop my pieces and try and create threats. So with bishop to d7, can anybody see what I'm threatening here? Take a moment, pause your video, and see if you can figure it out. All right, hint, hint. I actually have my cursor on the knight, so that means that I wanted to move this knight. By playing bishop to d7, I am not only protecting the knight twice while my opponent attacks it twice, but I'm also threatening a discovery attack with knight takes e5 if my opponent isn't careful. So let me give you a sample line of play. Let's say my opponent sees that I can take here. So he plays something like pawn to f4. Then I can play a6, and then he is forced to go back. And then now I can play knight takes anyway, because the bishop on a4 is actually hanging. So let me actually pull that up real quick. All right. So let me turn off that. Don't need that. So like, let's say for instance, again, pawn to f4. Just to explore this line out. Here, let's say I play a6, he plays bishop a4. Now this tactic works again. And you see that the discovery attack is very powerful. Now if he plays bishop takes, then I tuck the knight back in. And if he takes here, now I get the free bishop. And so I successfully broken down his center, and so that's really good. So let's go back. My opponent decided to play knight c3. And I thought that this was just a silly move because now, where's the hanging piece? Well, knight takes knight takes e5. So already this is, very good for me. After I play knight takes e5, there's just the converting phase. And one thing that I will say is, for the pawn, my opponent has some more space. But now that I taken away his e5 pawn, he will no longer be able to challenge my pawns moving forward and gaining space themselves. So his space is going to totally be crushed. And that's why this is already a game-losing move. But we're not at the win yet. We're not at the finish line. We have to make sure we're watching over this square. This square, not the bishop, but the square, is really important because all of his knights can kind of maneuver to it. So this isn't too good. So after knight takes, he plays pawn to f4. And I just decided to play knight to c6, right back. So again, now his pawn right here is watching over e5. So a bit of annoying, but again, I have two pawns in the center. He has 0. And I just want some material. So this is going to be fairly easy. I want to promote some trades and keep it simple. So here he plays castle. I play queen to b6, and I want to put a pin here. So I'm just trying to develop my pieces. He takes, I take, and now he plays knight to e2. So again, this is another tactic here where I just play queen b6. I keep it simple. Now that my opponent has played f4, his bishop cannot drop back to e3 to get himself out of this pin. So what am I doing? I just develop my piece and put pressure on my opponent, while at the same time relieving some pressure on the knight on c6. So after bishop takes, knight takes, he has to play knight e2 here, followed by pawn to c3. But this is exactly what I want because I'm up a pawn. All I want to do is trade. So I play bishop to c5 to provoke pawn to c3. And the reason why I play bishop c5 here, even though I know that he's going to play pawn to c3 and he'll have a successful defense, but bishop c5 also accomplishes something else. And that something else is that, one, it develops another piece. So it finishes development with a threat. And then it allows me to castle kingside. So here, I just play... Here I actually can play castle. That's what it's kind of pointing out. It's weird. I took off the engine, but it's still showing some arrows. But anyways, I can castle here. And then after king h1, I guess this is a line of play. But I think what was better was my move, which is f6. And now the idea is I still have this pin, right? And so what do you want to do with pins? All right? And what you want to do with pins is put pressure on them. So how do we put pressure on this knight? By playing e5. But I can't play e5 right away because then the pawn will take. So I have to prepare this move with the tempo gaining move f6. And by playing f6, my opponent plays bishop h4, and again, e5. So one thing I will say is that I had to calculate, like, okay, what's going on? Like, can he have some counterplay because my king isn't castled? So one thing I always say is don't attack before you castle. But I didn't mind here because there was no attack. And so by playing e5, this automatically wins some material. The computer points out queen b2. Queen takes b2 is also a good move. So e5, and now he plays b4. And I thought this was really interesting. Let's see if you guys can actually come up with the best move here. Did I capture on d4? Either way, did I capture here? Did I capture here? Did I retreat? Did I do nothing? What did I play in this position? Go ahead and pause the video, see if you can figure it out. Alright, so the move I played here was bishop to e7 because I realized this pin is still going to be here. So if your opponent tries to defend a pin by creating a threat. Well, if you move out of the way, your tactic will still be there, whether that be a fork or a discover attack or a skewer or whatever other tactical threat you may have in the on the board. So my opponent just plays king h1 here. It does point out that I could play b5, or he could play b5, and after b5, um, well, I'm looking now, like if I take and then he takes and then I push forward with the discovery attack, he does have knight d4, right? And then I would have to play something like bishop takes c6. It's a weird position. I also could just kind of take my own advice and move out of the way and then play to c4. And I think this honestly is just really good because after I play something like knight a5, my opponent will have to move his knight. So let's say he moves his knight to, well, first he'll chomp. He'll definitely chomp here. And then I would recapture, and then he'll capture here. Capture here. And then he'll probably play, oh wait, this is still pinned. Alright, so, yeah, this just doesn't even make sense. Yeah, after knight a5, I mean, this threat is still here, right? So, so king h1, and now pawn takes, knight takes, knight takes. I'm just trying to trade now. I'm up massive material. And here I just castle. And the one thing I want you guys to note is that this b4 pawn is not important. So you don't want to be too greedy. You're up in material. Notice your disadvantage if you have one. Usually if you're up in material, your opponent has some type of compensation. Here my opponent definitely doesn't have enough compensation, but I guess the only compensation we can really look at is, okay, my position here, the structure on f6 isn't great, it's kind of weakening along these diagonals. D5 may be, may come under fire, but in order to cancel all of that, diagonal going towards my king, the bishop being under a pin, all I had to do is castle. See, if I play like queen takes b4, I'm trying to play with fire. I don't want to do that. Instead of allowing my opponent to start gaining tempos and start counterattacking me, and my king still stuck in the center, what I'm going to do is just cancel out his disadvantage, or his advantage. And then once I do that, my advantage is still there. So all I have to do is castle. So after castle, my opponent plays a3 to fortify this, which makes sense. I'm not really trying to get my bishop to this square. I'm actually trying to get my rooks to the c file so I can infiltrate on c2. This bishop isn't really menacing. Everything is going my way, right? But I have to convert the advantage. Again, we're still not at the finish line. So we have to create additional threats. We have to keep breaking down the position. And I mean, right now this is protected. These two are protected. They're pretty strong. This isn't protected, but can easily be protected with pawn to g3 or bishop to g3 or like a queen d2 move. Very easily. I mean, oh, well, it is protected by the rook, but if I attack it twice. So rook to c8. Rook to e1. I cancel out this whole file by playing bishop to d6. So this is another important key, all right? So pro tip, whenever you're up in material, you want to cancel out all of your opponent's play, any counter play that he may have. So instead of, moving my bishop, well, I take note that my opponent has his rook down the e file. And if I want to cancel out my opponent's counterplay, I should play bishop to d6. Because then, if you notice, my bishops work very nicely to cancel out all of these squares. These are all of the entry squares in my territory. The bishops work nice. This pawn is actually doing some stuff too. So this is great. This rook is completely nullified. It cannot work. It's useless. So I make the e-file useless by tempting him to just tempo the bishop whenever I don't want the bishop there anyway. And I play bishop to d6. And if we're talking about a bit of a finesse here. That's why I played rook c8 first rather than bishop to d6. Yes, we can switch the move order, but if I play bishop to d6 first, then my opponent is less tempted to go on the e-file because he already knows I canceled it out. So, rook to c8, rook e1, bishop d6. Plays pawn to g3, fortifying that square. And now the square that I need to go to is this d pawn because this is actually the weakest pawn. So my opponent has some structural weaknesses, and I do too, but in order for me to continue putting pressure on my opponent, I need to have the ability to continue to create threats. If I don't have that ability, then I'm going to be in trouble. So for instance, if I play rook to c4, then I'll be putting pressure here. So that's what I do. Queen h5. This doesn't really come with a threat. I have this square covered, so I really don't get the purpose of this. I think my opponent is just kind of floundering. He doesn't know what he's doing here. So I just double up rooks. I could also take here, take here. They're both good. So I guess that's his idea. Maybe make an imprint or an impression on this square. Maybe he was trying to go for rook to e6, and then I play takes, and then he recaptures, and then he can maybe even play queen f7 and support that pawn to push through maybe. But this is really far-fetched because one, I don't have to take that pawn, and then two, my attack is coming first. So usually whenever you're the stronger side, your threat is going to be way stronger than your opponent's threat. So by just simply ignoring my opponent's threat, I'm able to continue my attack. Now, before you just continue your attack, you should definitely pay attention to your opponent's threats and at least acknowledge them in your head. If you can create a bigger threat though, then go for it. You know, offense is the best defense in this one. So rook takes d4. Pawn pushes. So I see his idea here. He's trying to break through. Okay. He'd rather not sit around. Play rook to c2, bishop g3. So here I create another big threat. So I take I put the rook on the 7th rank, and I'm also threatening rook takes h2. So bishop g3, bishop. Oh, I don't take. I could take though if I wanted to, but I see that if he takes here, then I just recapture, and I'm okay there. So takes. That was a silly move. I just take. Now he just went down the exchange for nothing because now here, and then he plays g5. Yeah, he's still trying to break through, but he just sacrificed the rook for a bishop there, and all he did was really place my bishop on a more passive square. So I don't know how useful that was. So here, oh, this is the magical move here. So I kind of gave you guys the answer, but what am I doing with queen to c6? Go ahead and pause your videos and see if you can come up with this answer. Why would I play a move like queen to c6? Alright, so if you said, because I want to win his queen, congratulations, that is not the move. Yes, I want to trade queens. I know my opponent will see this threat, okay? I know for a fact I'm not going to be able to scoop up the queen on the very next move. I'm not going to be able to do that. I know my opponent sees that. But what I am doing is threatening a few things. So the first one is, okay, I'm threatening the queen. Do you want to trade? The second thing I'm threatening is rook to c1, check. Rook takes c1. Queen takes c1, check. Bishop to e8. And then I can play something like rook to d1. I can't immediately capture because the queen is still over there watching, but I'm super close to mate, and then I pin to win. So that's automatically a winning position, right? And the last thing I am threatening is very simple mate in 2, which is pawn to d4, discover check, the king moves to g1, and then I just place my queen on g2, and that's game over. So it's such a powerful threat. So why would I allow my opponent to get out of this resistance so easily by just trading queens? Well, we want to keep things simple. And that's my last tip for converting this advantage. You want to keep things simple. You don't ever want to keep things super complicated. Because if you do, then that favors your opponent. If you're winning, keep it simple. That's what I'm doing here. And by trading queens, he plays queen e6, but then I get to take. By trading queens, here I'm allowed to just gobble up everything. So I first take that out, and then I push here. I want to push here so then my rook can then take. So then he can't go here. He probably could go here though. But then I would gain the tempo anyways. And he's going to be forced off this diagonal. So yeah, here, push. He goes here. And I just play rook here. So I want to gobble up this pawn. That's my first idea, but my main idea is just to push this pawn all the way through. And then play the rook there. So here he pushes, push, rook d1. And I just push. Can you guys see the last tactic here? If he takes... Alright, so if he takes, then I just play check. Rook goes back, and then I gobble it up, and that's checkmate. So he has back rank issues. Then I play check. He goes back. And then I just push up. And this is where my opponent resigns. So as we can see, sometimes the process of winning does take a few moves. This game was 37 moves. It's actually about average, but not all games are going to end swiftly and boom, 10 moves. Like no, sometimes your opponent will notice your threats, and even though they're losing, they're still going to put up some resistance. They're still going to force you to play an extra 15, 20 moves just to get the win. Some key things to do is, keep patient, stop that counterplay. It's not over till it's over, okay? And then the last one is after you get all the counterplay stopped, then you want to keep it simple, okay? Keep it simple for yourself. Do not complicate things on the board. That's the easiest way to mess up. Trust me, I know from experience that I used to try and keep it perfect and complicate things all the time, even in a winning position, and then I would end up losing. So I actually had to learn that the hard way. I don't want you guys to go through the same experience. Instead, I'd rather you guys just learn from my past mistakes and apply it to your game. All right. So I hope this video was helpful. Give it a thumbs up, and thanks. I'll see you guys next time.